I think it's on. No? Yes. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Washington Week of our Young Ambassadors program. Since 2006, this program of the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Latino has fostered the creative drive of over 290 Latino conscious leaders. That is 290 over more than 10 years. So we're very happy to be here. My name is Artiaga. I will be your moderator. I am joining you all from Chicago, Illinois. I was born and raised there. I attended the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, majored in agricultural and biological engineering, and then I moved forward with a tech career, previously at Meta/Facebook, previously at Microsoft, and I am a program manager. Today's informal conversation is called What's Next in STEM. We'll explore topics of AI and technology and what roles do Latinos play in this growing industry. I would like to welcome our online audience joining us today, along with our 2023 Young Ambassadors and alumni in the audience here in our Molina Family Latino Gallery. The National Museum of the American Latino would also like to thank Ford Motor Company Fund for their major and continued program support. So without further ado, we are going to have our panelists of today present themselves. So we're going to start off with Adán Chávez.
Awesome. Thank you, Anna. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Happy Thursday. Super excited to be here all the way via California. Definitely want to give a big thank you to Anna and, of course, the team at the Museum of the American Latino for this opportunity. Like Anna mentioned, my name is Adán Chávez, and I was formerly at Meta, where I drove their third-party engagement strategy with California state and local partners. This included working with the California Governor's Office of Governor Newsom, the state legislature, and state agencies. Before I was at Meta, I was leading national civic engagement campaigns at the National Association of Latino Elected and Appointed Officials, or UNALEO Education Fund for short, where I was making sure that Latinos were seen and heard from the 2020 census all the way to the 2020 election. I grew up in the Inland Empire, which, in case if you don't know, is the area in Southern California that often gets overlooked between LA and San Diego. Went to school at UC San Diego, where I double majored in political science and Spanish literature. Okay, we have a UC family member in the house. And I'm currently fund employed until further notice. Happy to be here.
I'm going to steal that term, fun employed. I like that. So hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Lara Madiedo. I am coming over to you guys from Boston, which is not as warm as it is here, and I love it because I grew up in South Florida. And so the hotter, the better. The humid, not the better, but it's never as humid as it is in Florida. So it's always better everywhere else. Let's see. I grew up South Florida, immigrant parents from Colombia, ended up in Boston to go to school to MIT. Everyone thought I was crazy. My parents were like, you will be back. Like, you will not like that weather. And plot twist, I did. So got my bachelor's, ended up staying for my master's, also in computer science. Played around with the idea. I wanted a Ph.D. That master's made me U-turn real quick. Realized that is not what I wanted to do. Kind of wanted to go more into industry, more into tech. And that kind of led me down my path to Microsoft, which is where I am now. So started kind of half on the research engineering side because I still had aspirations that maybe research was the path for me, even though it wasn't a full PhD. Learned real quick that also was not true. So kind of work on a team now, building really awesome tech solutions for some of Microsoft's customers. And then on the side, I lead the New England chapter of HOLA, which is the, God, I never know this acronym, Hispanic Organization of Leaders in Action. It's like the organizing group for like Latinos at Microsoft. And so through the New England chapter, I get to connect with a lot of people that are either based out of Boston or Maine or just all of kind of the states all around there. And yeah, that's about it. I'll pass it over to Dr. Florez.
Yes, we have another too. My name is Omar. Nice to meet you. Thank you, Anna, for inviting me here. Thank you also for the museum to gather this great event. Certainly, there are a lot of aspirations in this room. I can see a lot of scientists, a lot of future engineers that also will drive innovation in the country. My name is Omar. I am from Peru again. I was born and raised in Peru. Certainly, my family don't have enough money to pay my education to study here. However, I was lucky enough to learn that it's possible to do research in another country. And the world is actually waiting for, with open arms, people that do research in this country. That's why you see so many people from China, from Latin America, from India, and so on. Interesting fact, many CEOs in the Silicon Valley, where I am living, are actually from India, for instance, right? You see the case of Oracle, you see the case of Microsoft, you see the case of Google, and so on. Long story short, I decided to do a Ph.D. My first job was as a research scientist at Intel. I worked in the same team that developed that wheelchair for Stephen Hopkins. I worked 5 years there. It was an amazing experience, amazing project with one single customer. Eventually, we were able to develop technology that allowed this great person to express his feelings and opinions in a shorter time using computers. A very nice way to use computer science and artificial intelligence in order to improve the life of someone. After 5 years, I joined Capital One as a research manager. I had a team where we developed interesting algorithms for chatbots. Nowadays, chatbots is quite interesting. Probably some of you have heard about ChatGPT, for instance. After 2 years, I realized that manager was not my way to go, so I decided to join Twitter as a research scientist as well, where I worked 3 years. Right now, I am running my own company. It's a startup where we really want to develop movie scripts using large language models. We can talk about that in detail later, but just in a short, I really hope that many of you leave this room with many teachings from the life of other people, and as well as different type of things that you can do in your own life. So I really hope that in the next years you will be sitting here, and we will probably listen to your own story as well.
Thank you so much. And then just checking, is this mic also turned on?
Press it again. All right, we should be able to hear it.
Good to go. And then that one's turned on as well.
We need to turn that one on too, yes.
There's a small button.
There's a red button on the bottom. There you go.
Making sure all of our audience can hear us online. We haven't forgotten about you all. So as we heard, all of our panelists have amazing inspirational careers, and there had to be something that inspired them as well. So my next question is, how did you know that you wanted to go into tech? Did you always know? What was the reason? What was the inspiration? And I'm going to go start off with Jennifer, because I think I heard a clearer path of, hey, you have a bachelor's, you have a master's in computer science and engineering. Why was it that the direct route for you?
Playing mic hockey over here. So I actually, is it on? Yeah, it is on. Okay. So I guess I had a more traditional path through tech, but at the same time, I did not go in thinking that's what I wanted to do. So first off, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So a lot of my dad's side of the family are engineers. A lot of my mom's side happened to be in medicine. So I thought I wanted to be a doctor. Turns out my sister did as well. She grew up in that whole Grey's Anatomy era. And she was 6 years older than me. So I had the pleasure of seeing her go through med school and then start residency. And like a lot of things in my life, I saw that and I was like, I don't know if that's the path for me, because I liked a lot of other things, and medicine seemed to be one of those things that you really had to be all in, like this is the love of your life, because you're about to go through like some hard times for the next like decade of your life. So I saw that and I was like, that's great for her. I'm so glad she's a doctor. Don't think that's the path for me. And so then I kind of thought, well, maybe more engineering. My dad was a civil engineer, and I was like, buildings are cool. Engineering stuff is cool. I like working with my hands. And having grown up in South Florida, I grew up about 4 hours south of Cape Canaveral, which is where NASA sends up a lot of its rockets. So in school, I would see a lot of like the rocket launches and stuff, and people would tease like, are you really going to go be a rocket scientist? And I was like, well, why not? I mean, there's nothing stopping you from being one. So got to MIT, ended up deciding to go there because I was like, if I'm going to do engineering and they take me, this seems like the great place to do it. So went in fully an aeroastro major, ready to like build rockets and go be an astronaut or something. And then I had an experience that I feel like is one very similar to maybe what's happening now with AI, which is I went to my first career fair. I was like a 3-week freshly minted freshman. And I was there for like the free t-shirts and the pens and like all the stuff because I knew no one was going to hire me. And I went and I talked to all the Aerostro companies, and turns out they only wanted to talk to all the computer science majors because they only needed like a small handful of Aerostro engineers and like a small handful of mechanical engineers, and like 90% of their workforce was actually computer science. Because they were the ones that ran the software, the simulations, all of this sort of stuff. And I kind of had a moment, and I walked around to a lot of other places, and I was getting that same kind of feeling. And I realized that, there were 2 things that could happen. One, I could decide to just go into Aeroastro, and then this would be, the field I was forever in. But then I was like, one, if this might not be what I want, because what do I know at 18, like deciding potentially for the rest of my life? It feels like I might get a little stuck because it's a very specific field. But 2, even in that field, they want a lot of more people in computer science working. And so I ended up like poking at computer science because I'd never used a computer for more than like Word and like that little Minesweeper game that I was always like terrible at. So I had no idea what coding was. I had no idea what like anything in the world of like software or tech was, but I was like, I might as well check it out. Maybe that'll help me find an easier path. And turns out I loved it, and I ended up becoming a straight software engineer, which is not what I thought I was going to do. But what I told myself throughout that whole time, and I still think is true, is that every and any industry needed someone in software or needed someone in tech. So if at any point in time I decided that there was something else going on that I thought was cooler, I could probably pivot to that with a lot less effort having this like background in tech than if I'd like hyper specialized sort of in that first field. So I originally picked it to keep my options open, and then kind of fell in love with it and just went straight along the whole time.
Thank you, Jennifer. So we have a real pivoter here, and that reminds me of Adán's background, because Adán was not a computer science major or an engineer, but he ended up in tech. So I'd love to hear how someone who did not want to go at all into this field transitioned into it.
Of course, thanks, and I'm funny enough, I was going to mention that. I think that for me, I never sort of imagined a career in tech, both, from sort of a career standpoint, because not only is it traditionally challenging to break into tech, but there's even less sort of career opportunities when it comes to policy outreach and that whole world within tech. But then too, where I came from, right? To Jennifer's point, like, I remember that the first time I had access to a computer was already like in 8th grade, and it wasn't even ours. Like, it was part of our computer lab at school. And I remember typing like this and being like, where is the L? Where is the T, right? And so I think for me, I sort of happened to fall in this almost in a very serendipitous way. As an undergrad, I studied both political science and Spanish literature, and I got involved in the world of advocacy and issue-based campaigns. I really felt like as an undergraduate student, I could raise my voice and make a difference in the things that matter to me and my communities, right? Many of you might also share that same conviction, right? The work that you do, the reason why you get up every day is to try to make your family, your neighborhood, your community better, right? And that got me to my first sort of formalized experience leading campaigns at the national level. And so we were trying to get out to count, get out to vote in the middle of a pandemic. And we never saw any of this come, right? So immediately once, quarantine happened and we all had to go home and try our best to be safe. I know it might be too soon. There might be some PTSD that's real, right? We had to take all of our work into the digital space, right? So what did that mean? We had to leverage things like social media and all sorts of technological tools at our disposal to get the word out, to engage, educate, and mobilize our communities, right? Yes, there was a global pandemic, but we needed people to count because that's how we got federal dollars in our communities to respond to crises like those. And as those campaigns were starting to wrap up, I was starting to think about what was next for me. I thought about going into philanthropy because I was like, you know what? The difference is where the dollars are at, and I feel like I can make a difference here. But then I also really considered tech. I thought about how powerful it would be if you had someone with my lived experience, with my professional experience, and you take it to a company like Facebook at the time. And I had happened to hear that Facebook had a goal of registering 4 million people to vote. And I really thought about the sort of impact I could have in different spaces, and I knew that I couldn't have as much of an impact if it wasn't for a place like Facebook. They had the reach, the access, the platform, the tools, right? And funny enough, around that time, I was sort of messing with Ana, so make sure to be really nice to your peers here because you don't know who's gonna help you find your next job opportunity. I don't know if any of you all still know Snapchat, but Ana and I maintained contact over the years, and one day I was just messing around her because she was a recruiter at Meta at the time. And I was like, oh my God, your life seems so fun. Like, are y'all hiring?
You said, recruit me.
I was like, please pick me. And honestly, like, manifesting is powerful. So like, a shout out to me for being wild like that. But she's like, actually, if you want to apply to a job, let me know. I can get you a referral link. Like, honestly, Ana, like, was the first person who stuck her hand out and offered me to help lift me up. And I was like, at first, not taking it seriously. I was like, oh, whatever, like, I'll just apply. I doubt they're gonna hit me up. I'm gonna go into sort of this black hole of applications. And literally within a week, I had a recruiter contacting me, and I was like, are you all sure this is the Adán Chávez you wanna talk to, right? And so, funny enough, started interviewing in August. By the time November came around, election day 2020, I signed my offer with Meta. And since then, it's been such a wild journey, and I've had a chance to work on so many different things that I personally care about, but I really feel like really make a difference. And, I think that when you have people with your experiences, when you have people with your background, your perspectives, and companies like this, really leveraging the tools, the resources, everything available to your disposal, I think that's very powerful. And one thing I learned is that I didn't necessarily have to change who I was because Facebook was looking to grow out their government outreach program. They wanted people to foster relationships with government officials, to help people learn the platform, to help others make their voices heard. And so this just happened to be a really great fit for me.
Thank you, Adán. So that's a nice reminder for all of our young ambassadors in the room. You'll never know when you'll talk to another young ambassador
On Snapchat.
again or on Snapchat. And I'm actually a young ambassador from the 2013 cohort. And Adán is a young ambassador from the 2014 cohort. So we were not in the same cohort, so keep those connections. But Adán mentioned something really particular that struck out to me, which was his upbringing, right? Not having that access, not something that you considered because you didn't grow up around it. And I wanted to pivot to our Dr. Omar, because I know you have a background from Peru, and I wanted to know how that influenced, your decision to follow tech or your journey today.
That's a great question, Ana. Thank you. I think now it's working, actually. I fully agree with Adán and also with Jennifer that this is certainly a world of opportunities, and particularly this is a country of opportunities. I have crazy stories to tell you about this. Let me tell you first that I decided to join computer science because I had a talk with a professor back when I did my undergrad in Peru. And he told me, do you know it's possible to predict the future? And for me, that was crazy. How can we predict the future, right? Statistically speaking, an event is something that happens with some probability. And if the probability is high, it will happen or will occur in the future as well. That's why we can predict words when you use ChatGPT. That's why you can predict the face of someone that the computer didn't see before, because there are some patterns that actually reoccur over time. Honestly speaking, he was telling me some of the foundations of math and statistics behind computer science and behind artificial intelligence. I just got so in love with this concept that you could predict the future that I decided to go deeper into this. I decided to take classes that have a strong statistical foundation. Then I realized that it was a few years in order to get the full understanding of this. So that's why I decided to do a PhD. I never thought about working anywhere. I was only thinking about getting deeper knowledge in a particular area. artificial intelligence was not popular back then. There were even more probably profitable careers like distributed systems. You want to do a search engine like Yahoo or Google, you need to probably do another different things. But certainly this concept of predicting the future was so interesting to me. Back in Peru, I realized that we had this class called operating systems. So I have the pirate copy of the book, like everyone in my class. And then I decided to think what people in US study when they take the same class, operating systems. So I went to the Berkeley webpage and I checked what is the syllabus for people studying that in Berkeley. And I realized it was the same book, exactly the same book. Of course, I had a pirate book of this. It's very common in Peru. And then I realized, okay, the difference is not the content. If we actually have the same content, why they are better students than I am? Then I realized that many of my professors actually use that book, and sometimes they didn't attend to class either because they were busy with other works and so on. So I realized that the difference could be in the professor, and also the difference could be in the student. So at that point, I realized that probably the only difference between a student in Peru or a student in Berkeley, given that we have the same content, is actually how much you want to get deeper into this. So I decided to contact the professor of that class in Berkeley and tell him, you know, my name is from Peru, my name is Omar, I am from Peru, and I'm really taking your class. Can you tell me, I have a doubt about this question, and I saw the slides in your webpage. So we start talking, and I realized that how open are people around the world to actually help you when you actually have questions, right? Even if you're in a different country. Over time, I started doing research because I realized that many of these professors actually are professors just part-time because their main job is to do research, especially in universities like MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, and so on. Over time, I developed more communication with this person, also like in contact with other professors. And then when I wanted to know what to do in my life after, I decided to send another email to another professor from another university that was working in voice recognition. I was also doing research in voice recognition by then. I sent an email at 9 p.m. I went to sleep like 11 p.m. When I wake up the next morning, like 8 a.m., I already had an answer from the email saying, you know what, you are welcome to attend to my research group in Utah. We will pay you this amount of money for 5 years. And by the way, since you have papers, you don't even need to do your master, you can do your PhD directly. Just one email away, you can see the amount of opportunities that are surrounding us right now. Long story short, I decided to take that opportunity. I also had other opportunities in Chile, Brazil. That's why I said the world is surrounded with opportunities. And certainly, as Adán said, one message could actually make a difference in your life. So my first advice for you is that don't be shy. If you want to work at OpenAI, send an email, send a LinkedIn connection to someone working there. If you want to do research in artificial intelligence, take the email of the most important person that you see in this field and just send an email. Telling him, my name is Dad, I am working in this. Never go with your hands up empty though. Just said, I am doing this. I have these results. I read this paper. I have this question. I want to do this, but I already did this so far. You will be surprised of how many people actually want to help the next generation of scientists and engineers in this country.
Let's see. Oh, it's loud now.
Engineer.
Awesome. Well, that was very inspirational, Omar. And yes, plenty of opportunity. And that brings us to our next topic. We want to go more in depth into STEM, tech, AI, and we all know that AI is the new buzzword. And this concept is moving so fast. It is really difficult to grasp what's happening. So when we talk about helping and our professors helping and email helping, a fellow YAP person helping, how are we going to enhance lives with AI? Or is it replacing our lives, right? That's a very controversial topic, and I'm going to let Jennifer take this one.
I always forget. I have this mic right here. Yeah, as someone who, I also did my master's in AI, and I didn't even do it that long ago. It feels like so long ago based on like where AI is now. Cause it was only like 4 or 5 years ago. And when I was doing my master's, there was like, I mean, there's lots of areas of AI, but like the hot one was like machine learning. You know, these large language models where ChatGPT is, they were like kind of starting to get cool, like a little more mainstream in the research field, because you had Alexa and you had Siri, but you guys know like they can only go so far, right? They can tell you some jokes, you can have like maybe 1 or 2 levels of conversation with them, and then it's like, sorry, I don't understand what you're asking, right? So that's where like all the buzzy stuff was, and then I was more on the side of like, you know, my research professor called it like core artificial intelligence, like trying to understand what it means for AI to be conscious, to actually like mirror what we're doing. And so we were kind of on the side, because machine learning was where all the money was. That's where like Google and Twitter and all of those were kind of scooping people up. And so I say that to say, like, I've seen where machine learning has been going for a lot of years and all of the research that's coming out. And even to me, like where we are with ChatGPT and with OpenAI, it's not surprising because it was almost inevitable just based on where the research is. But I think how popular it's become and how really that transition from like things that researchers use and like, this is gonna sound weird, but like the normal, like the non-research people, like all of us, like the normal people, use it like maybe just with our Alexa to like ChatGPT and OpenAI just kind of having exploded. So I say that to say, even someone who's been in the industry, I'm still like very surprised about everything that's happened. And part of it is not, you almost can't stay up to date with everything. I know even within Microsoft and within my teams, and we are like at a tech company, and there's this huge scramble of like, how are we gonna upskill? How are we gonna learn how to do this stuff? Because we have companies coming to us being like, oh, you're Microsoft, you know how to do this. And I was like, do I? Are you sure? You paid a lot of money, so apparently I do, so I need to go how to figure this out. And so I think it's a rapidly changing field, but then even more to Anna's question of like, what is it that matters? And I think that's something I tell a lot of people when they are either super excited about AI or the like more doomsday, like, you know, robots are going to take over our lives and we all live in a simulation and all of that stuff, is like, AI is just a tool, and it looks really, really cool because we've trained it for like gazillions of hours on like crazy amounts of data. So yeah, it's going to become like a really good like repetition machine. And these like generative models are going to become really good at like predicting what the next words are, predicting what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, to me, they are just tools. And the really radical things we can do is figure out how we can use those tools to like leverage for the things we want to accomplish. So I've heard stories of a lot of people, for example, you know, using OpenAI as a way to, in my experience, like teach them how to code more productively, right? So if any of you ever had the experience of like, you want to go learn how to code, and maybe you put that into Google, and there's like a million different people that are telling you this is the way to go learn. Like, no, you have to watch these YouTube videos, or you have to do like this, like Khan Academy course, or like you have to do this and this, and it becomes like super overwhelming. Do you study it in college? Do you take like a bootcamp course? Do you know, it's all of these things. But then like something like ChatGPT and OpenAI, like it can become your buddy of like, oh, I'm interested in doing this. How would you do it? Maybe it pops some stuff for you. Maybe it teaches you what are the best places to go look, where it's like, you know, I searched all of Google and these are like the top 2 or 3 most important things you can go look, right? And so I've already had that experience with talking to people that are like trying to learn new things, that it has like rapidly helped them like cut through all of the time they spend just like figuring out what's actually important and like being able to learn on that. And there's so many different examples like in the outreach space and in all these different areas where if we figure out the right way to leverage these tools, it's going to be amazing, because it's going to take the work that, you know, someone is maybe putting in 100 hours of work in the nonprofit space or in all of these spaces because they're driving and they're trying to push change. And the reality is, what if they could only put 50 amount of hours and still drive the same amount of change. And now this person has more sanity, more free time, more time to spend on like things that they find more important than maybe like all the grudge work that you have to do on the side. And so that's, I think, the really cool space. And like, yeah, the fact that it can like write itineraries for you at like, or an itinerary for a Florida trip for me and my friends that we thought was really cool. Like, I think that's fun. And I think that falls in the same place of like Alexa and Siri, like they have fun ways to use them and we should enjoy them because they are fun. But really thinking of how can we use them to kind of revolutionize and drive the things that we're already doing.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I am guilty. I actually use ChatGPT, and I'm going to Canada next week. And I put on there, give me a 3-day itinerary for Canada.
Good.
It's pretty good. So it's like, I don't know how that's going to work out in the future, but as well said, it is a tool, and it is a tool that could be used to our advantage. But then what does that mean for our community, right? We have AI, we have in Meta here, AR, we have AR/VR. What does that mean for our community with our culture, our identity? And I will move this forward to Adán.
Of course, thank you, Anna. I'm actually going to toss the beginning of this question to the audience just to get a feel here, and hopefully we can get some more movement and energy. Who is on social media, has experience with social media, knows social media? Go ahead and raise your hand. Okay, cool. Okay, awesome. Great to know that the panelists are also about that life. Great. Second, who has experience coding, knows that coding is a thing, has coded before? No worries if this is not you, because I have a MySpace coding experience, but you all probably don't know what MySpace is, so never mind. Okay, we have some hands. Who knows about AR/VR, has tried AR/VR? Like, okay, less hands, got it, but still some hands in the room. Who's messed around with ChatGPT and my bad.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all need to be on this panel. I need to take some lessons from y'all. I think there's two, so the reason why I asked this is because two things here. One, we need to, and this is sort of to Jennifer's point, we need to know about these tools and we need to know how to use them, right? But then two, we also need access to them, right? If our community doesn't know how to use them and doesn't have access, they're essentially going to be disenfranchised from this set of opportunities, right? And if they're disenfranchised, then of course they're disempowered. And there are, I think, so many different opportunities via AR, VR, social media, AI, right? Speaking of which, just last year, we worked with the California Department of Public Health to launch the first AI-powered chatbot, where Californians across the state could get information in both English and Spanish about COVID-19. All they would have to do is text the word hola or hello to a number I cannot remember right now, click a link or scan a QR code. It would open up the chatbot experience on WhatsApp, and then people can get all their questions answered in English or Spanish, completely for free, in real time, on their phone, in the palm of their hands. And it could be accessed at any time of the day. I think that is one of the ways that AI and technology is empowering our communities, because many of you know this, Latinos are disproportionately targeted for misinformation. Many Latinos didn't know when, where, what was in the vaccine, where to get it, how to get it, if it was effective or not, right? There was a bunch of misinformation out there related to COVID-19 at large. And this was a great way to leverage technology and get people, one, to combat misinformation, but also get people the accurate and reliable information they need so that they can make the choices in their best interest and the best interest of their communities, right? When we think about AR, VR, for example, there's a bunch more value there. It can be used for advocacy purposes, right? One of the demos we used to showcase at Meta was called Traveling While Black. And through this demo, people had an opportunity to learn what it was like to live the life of a Black American in the United States. It had sort of this larger civil rights focus, right? For many of us who are interested in advocacy careers or already in advocacy careers, this is a great way to really platform the injustice, the struggles, the oppression that happens across different communities. It can also be used for education. People can study using AR, VR. One of my friends was a med school doctor at the time. He would have like whiteboards filled with his notes on his, AR/VR device, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunities here, and I think that, all of us sort of have that responsibility to, of course, make sure that we know about these opportunities, that our communities know about these opportunities, but at the same time, we're pushing for more and more access. Because you saw many hands go down when we talked about AR/VR, right? Or we talked about different aspects of technology, right? So I think that by keeping some of these things in mind, we can make sure that, like Jennifer is saying, we can really leverage these tools for our community.
Thank you, Adán. And that builds to Dr. Omar here, who says he has started his own company to create opportunities like this. And Omar, I'd like to know from you, tell us a little bit more about that sense of the need of Latino representation in the STEM field.
Sure. Something interesting is that we can see AI as a tool. And we humans started using tools 1 to 2 million years ago. How do we know this? Is because we found stones. We've also found bones. And they were, interesting enough, we use them as weapons to actually get some food and also to protect our families and so on. Something interesting about AI is that it's a tool that can use other tools. And for me, that's one interesting aspect of this. It's probably the first time in human history where we created a tool that actually can make calls to APIs and use, for instance, Google, can use a social network, can make a call, can post a post in Twitter or Facebook for you, and so on. Also can access your calendar, can actually negotiate resources like time with other agents and so on. So pretty much this is what we are trying to do, to use agents powered by large language models, which is the technology behind ChatGPT, to actually negotiate with other devices and other language models. I remember when I was in school, someone very smart told me, Omar, when 50 years later, we will see something interesting. There will be this new generation of kids, and they will tell us, it is true that when you were younger, you talked to the microwave, and the microwave never replied to you. These are very, very rude machines that you had back then. And it's true, I think we're moving towards this generation of devices that actually will be smart enough to interact with you and also with other devices. So pretty much we're exploring this area of having, say, 1 ChatGPT per person in a community, and see how can we negotiate things and how can we actually make agreements in order to take complicated decisions. So from a viewpoint of someone like you that are deciding what to study, and later we actually go into the market and we try to find a job, let me tell you something interesting that I learned these years. The world really is looking for diversity, and in order to have diversity, you have to have identity. Right? So if you want to do an amazing PhD thesis, if you want to do a great master thesis, if you want to actually do interesting research or even a project in a company, people will look for something different, something diverse. And if you actually embed your identity into your project, into your thesis, into your curriculum, into your CV, you will have more opportunities. What I'm trying to say is that one way to actually make use of the STEM is when you actually implement your own identity towards this. We are a community of Latinos and Latinas. Is it possible to combine the culture, the values and culture of Latinos into AI? Yes, it's possible. Let me tell you an example. For instance, 2 years ago, we celebrated 200 of independence in Peru. So one of the biggest problems for me is that when kids study the history of Peru, they see representations of drawings of heroes and different people that make important events like 200 years ago, right? but you have a difference with this representation because it doesn't look real. So what I did was to use GANs. GANs stands for Generative Adversarial Networks, which allow us to turn these pictures into photos. So you start looking all of a sudden someone that is a national hero, but look like your cousin, you look like your neighbors and so on. And that took a lot of media, and also that certainly convinced many people that actually these people that make a lot of important events for the country are certainly no different than us, and you can actually build conversations on top of this. My last point here, and I will very quickly close here, is that this field of artificial intelligence started around 1950. 70 years ago, many people have devoted a lot of effort towards this point. And over time, we have been solving problem by problem in a progressive manner. If you see this as a house, finally, we see the building blocks of the house. And you can create more interesting things on top of that. That's why ChatGPT is so relevant nowadays, because there are like 20 years of research behind this. My advice for you is to actually create new and interesting things on top of these algorithms that we have discovered and mastered, to the point that now you can use language and use a computer to understand language and create very sophisticated things. So don't reinvent the wheel, and just use this amount of knowledge that we have accumulated as a society, and also mix your Latino values towards that. And you will find something interesting in the intersection.
Thank you, Omar. And following the identity, Jennifer, how do we bring that identity? I know you mentioned you are part of the employee resource group at Microsoft for Latinos and Hispanics. How do you feel that you brought that from school? Did you feel like it was a safe space to have your Latina identity at school? And how do you bring that to work as a professional?
Yeah, so going back to, I guess when I was in school and being at MIT, so, or maybe I'll take it even further than that. So I grew up in South Florida, but I grew up in a suburb that was not very diverse. There wasn't a lot of Latinos. So it was more on the low income end, but more low income on white or more low income on African American. And so to me, like my Latino identity came from my family and my home and like being where I grew up, but not so much surrounded by the school I went to or the community I was in. And so then I went up to MIT, and for a lot of my friends, you know, coming from El Paso, coming from San Diego, coming from LA, like to them it was a culture shock, because when you get to a PWI, a predominantly white institution, they look around and they're like, there are not a lot of people that look like me here, and this is like mildly terrifying. But I got there and I was like, oh my God, there are a lot more people that look like me here than where I grew up. And so the one thing I knew I needed was, I was very far away from home. It's a 3-hour plane ride, which my parents like panicked every minute of the way that I was on the plane to Boston. And I remember them telling me, they're like, you need to find your community. Like, you need to go find the Latinos wherever they are. You need to find them, because like, if anything happens, they will take care of you. They will become the people that understand you. Not to say you shouldn't make other friends, make lots of friends. You're in a diverse school, but like go find la gente, like go find them. And so I got to MIT, and that's what I did. And it's funny because the first day I was there, you arrived and you hear like salsa music playing out of one of the dorms, and I was like, where's that coming from? And it turns out there was a Latino living group on campus. And there was also like a Latino student organization. And so I gung-ho type A personality. I was like, all right, here we go. I'm about to get more involved than I probably should, but this is what we're gonna do. And so I found that space in my university, and it became a place where as different issues came up, we as a community could respond to them together. One of the more pointed ones, and I'm very upset I actually don't remember his name. There was someone on the janitorial staff that worked at MIT for 25 years, and while we were there during the Trump presidency, was getting deported. And it was this huge like campaign that we brought up, and to most of the administrators we talked to, they didn't even know his name. They didn't even know it was like anything that was going on. And so when I left school and I was going kind of into the corporate space, it's almost an extension of going into a PWI because the tech space is very not diverse again, which turns a lot of people off, honestly, and it kind of sucks, and we're working to fix it. Or I'm trying to work to make like a small impact. But it was a reality that I knew I was going into, and so I had that same mentality of like, I need to find my people and I need to find like a small community. And so within Microsoft, particularly, and I know a lot of other big tech companies at least have this, they have these employee resource groups where you can kind of like come together and, you know, meet, mingle, go to events, do all these different things with people in your community. And so the one that we had in my office was for all of New England, because we weren't that big of an office, so all of New England gets its own, whereas a place like Texas, Dallas has its own, and Austin has its own, and Houston has its own, because there's lots of people there. But I think that piece of like bringing your identity to work, like I have like had the great privilege that, you know, everyone that works out of the Boston office itself is really wonderful, and I think it's, sure, the people are wonderful, but it's in a city that has so many universities, so much education, so many like young people coming in and out. Like it creates a culture where you can be yourself and you don't have to, you know, kind of hold back parts of yourself. And so while I have always felt that, it's still, you know, day in, day out, not interacting with people that had the same lived experiences as me, that had the same thoughts as me, like, that's part of what also drew me to trying to find Ola. And in that place, you then can start push the things that matter to you. And so some of it is like, yeah, we go to like a cooking class because not everyone knows how to cook, and it's a great and fun time. And maybe we have some margaritas there too. And like, that's awesome. But we also, for example, we bring in speakers from different areas around, like we brought Dr. Juan del Nido, who's doing a lot of research in Brazil with like the Uber disrupting the taxi market in Rio de Janeiro, and like how that has completely like upended that economy. And that actually inspired a lot of people to go get involved with him, and some people did like a research trip with him. We kind of do some outreach sometimes in like local nonprofits, and that gets people really involved. Or even just thinking like, you know, when Microsoft is doing hiring, we're like, hey, you know, and these policies that are coming up, like, are you taking a stand by hiring in certain cities or certain places? Are you supporting the people and the institutions that are like actively taking rights away from other people? And so I think it's a place of, it's a way to bring the things you value and the things that you care about to a space with other people that carry those same things. And then as a unit, you have more power and you have a bigger voice. And so that, I think that's what I love so much about that community, so much that I lead it now. And then the second part is just that, you know, COVID was real and it sucks, and a lot of people are lonely now and remote. And I think that's the other thing, technology can bring you together and can bring communities together, even if you're not in the same place anymore. And so that part too.
Thank you, Jennifer. And that is very true. The power is in the numbers. So when we stick together, we are very powerful, and we all know that, and we will all stay connected with technology, right? I was also part of Ola and Microsoft, and I remember somebody taught me how to make tortillas on there, and I was like, don't you think I already know how to make tortillas? But it was very fun. So it's absolutely join these groups in college, join these groups when you join your workforce. And then speaking of the workforce, you know, we know that there's going to be plenty of opportunity, as this is a continuing growing field. It's not going to go away. If anything, we should be catching up. So I want to ask Adán for his perspective as someone who doesn't have a background in engineering, but has a very strong background in policy, as to where do you see the future growth and opportunities for the Latino community in the STEM fields?
Yeah, let me just say that I think that there's a role for everyone to play, right? I am sort of a digital organizer, advocate, turned into a civic technologist, right? But we need doctors in tech, we need artists in tech, we need teachers in tech, right? because of course, the lived experiences and the perspectives that you all bring, right? But also because tech is really at the intersection of everything, right? Like, we can't talk about disaster preparedness without talking about tech. We can't talk about our democracy without talking about tech. We can't talk about crime, right? Or even insurrection without talking about tech, right? So I think for all of us, this is something to think about, right? What role do we want to play? And to your point, Anna, tech isn't going anywhere, especially when it comes to things like the metaverse, right? Right now, we're sort of in the dial-up phase of the metaverse, right? The conversations are only just now starting on what the metaverse is going to look like and how we're going to build it with accessibility, safety, security in mind. And so when we think about the opportunities we haven't had, we have one right in front of us, right? To build this metaverse where we're all contributing and we're all taking an active part in saying what the metaverse should look like and how it should work for our communities, right? So I'll leave everyone with that grain of salt. I think that, social media will continue to be bread and butter. And I think that at the same time, AI is going to continue to blow up. I think right now we're only seeing the beginning, right? The metaverse, even though it might not necessarily be the talk of the town, I think it's going to continue to be a murmur these next couple of years, right? Until maybe it gets to being that bigger talk of the town, right? So I think we should all think about, of course, the role that technology plays in our lives, but also the role we want to play in technology. Because right now is when we should start asking these questions, is when we should start thinking critically and really make our voices heard.
Thank you, Adán. And I know everyone in this room who is soon to enter college is thinking about these questions critically. I know our audience, wherever you might be, college, professional life, this also is coming up in your minds. But I do want to wrap it up with the focus of our students here and have Dr. Omar have some concluding words as to what advice will you give our future scientists, our future mathematicians, our future doctors, engineers present with us today.
Absolutely. I agree with Adán again that tech is everywhere, but also AI is getting everywhere as well. You cannot understand democracy nowadays if you don't put AI into the game. You don't understand how we actually detect crime in real time if we don't understand how AI also play a role into the puzzle, right? So I advise you to look into the future for whatever decision you take in your professional career. Try to think how the world is going to be in 5 years. If you just focus on one single technology, it's likely that in 5 years, this technology will get outdated. Before, we usually say, you know what, I cannot see beyond 10 years into the future. Nowadays, I am afraid that we cannot see 5 years away into the future. And probably with the time, because this is an exponential change, we will not see beyond 2 years. So the best advice that I can probably give you, and I was thinking about when I was coming to this event, is to read. If you read every day 2 hours or 3 hours, usually whenever you want, you will always be updated. In other words, if you have one thought in your mind, you will be very secure about it, and that's good. If you have 2 thoughts in your mind, you will doubt. If you have 3 thoughts in your mind, you will start comparing different hypotheses. You will start creating knowledge. You will start actually optimizing process. So the more you read, the better will be your critical process. And this ability to learn new things and to think critically is probably what will define the next years of any career. Either you want to get deeper into AI or not. I agree with Jennifer that this is just a tool. However, I really hope that we add a more Latino flavor into this tool. A few years ago, I attended many of these conferences, and they were mostly in English. You barely could find someone speaking Spanish. So as a Latino, you get lost, right? You're in a very sophisticated in terms of like how can I say this? You see people talking with sophisticated terms about entropy, about cross validation, about gradients, about conditional probabilities, and so on. And you don't see anyone talking in Spanish. The thing is that we are there, but we are not connected. So with some friends, we decided to create this community called Latinx in AI. And every year, this is becoming more and more popular. The nice part of this is that we got funds from tech companies to pay the trips for any Latino around the world to attend to top conferences, like ICML, NewLib, CVPR, iClear, and so on. These conferences are in different places of the world, and we actually fund the trip, the registration, the meal, and also the flight ticket to people that get accepted into the program. And we run this program like 4 or 5 times a year. So nowadays, you have this opportunity as well. If you have a paper, just submit this paper to this event, and you will have a venue to attend to top conferences. So if you want to see a change in the AI community, you can also create your own change. So that would be my advice for you. Remember, just read, just compare, just try to reach to people, just send an email, just send a post, and also do. It's very easy to read, but the moment that you start doing is when you actually create opportunities for everyone. Everybody can say nice words about AI. But you coding these ideas, implementing them, having experimental results, creating a web page, having a demo. Why ChatGPT is so popular? Because there is a demo where people actually can play with that. It's the first time that we have a so advanced technology that any part of the world can actually play with it. Why Midjourney is so popular? Because there is a demo where anyone can actually generate images based on text. So if you just have a nice idea and this idea lives in a paper and nobody reads it, it actually it will be limited to few people. But if you read, if you create knowledge, if you create and have an action, and also if you actually are not afraid to or not shy to talk to everyone about your innovations, your creation, your ideas, and so on, you will actually create this circle of how can I say this? This circle of abundance, where actually everyone can actually chime in nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you. We end on a very positive note. How Adán says manifestation is real. And Dr. Mars telling us we are abundant. So let's not veer away from tech. We all play a part of it. And I hope this concludes our session. I do hope that we all walk away learning something new. And we thank all of our audience for joining us from home, from here present at the National Museum of the American Latino, at the Molina Gallery. And till next time, thank you, everyone.
Yeah.